For example, yesterday I went to a bar in Hamburg. It's called the Dancing Unicorn.
Oh, adjective and an animal. That's my favorite kind of bar. Welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from Good Morn, and I'll be your host as you, I, and our international Hansa accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny, Cyrilla of Sintra, across the continent. Hey guys, so I've been sick with a cough the last week, and of course, the night before release when I record voiceovers is the night I lose my voice. So I'll keep it very short this week, and episode 11 Alyssa is going to help me out where she can. Thank you to our existing patrons over on Patreon and our producer-level patrons. Louise of Covier, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Cool Guy Henry, Eric the Godling, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob, Mahaka Melter Joe, Julie, Sylvia Skelga, Will P., Brandon, Jameson, Ava of Gullet, and Eric the Bear of Beauclair. As producer-level patrons, they receive an introduction shout-out, a spot on the website, monthly bonus content, stickers, a t-shirt, an exclusive producer gift, and producer credits in each and every episode. If you'd like to explore becoming a patron of the show, head over to patreon.com/breakfastinbeauclair. I'll introduce our new January patrons next episode when I can give them a proper Breakfast in Beauclair welcome. In this episode, we're joined by our friend Louisa from Germany to discuss A Little Sacrifice from Andrzej Sapkowski's Sword of Destiny and her experience with LARP, or live-action role-playing. In Tidings from Toussaint, Lars from Witcherflix joins for Season 1 stats and Season 2 news from Netflix's The Witcher. Without further ado, let's get to this episode's short story, A Little Sacrifice. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Breakfast in Beauclair. My name's Alyssa, and today we're joined by our friend Louisa from Germany. Hey Louisa.
Hi.
How's it going?
I'm fine. I'm really happy to be here, to be your guest today.
And I'm really excited to have you.
Thank you.
Louisa, you're already an avid fan of the Witcher universe, and you and I had actually met through Instagram through the Good Morn account, right?
Yes, I found your account on Instagram because I'm really into The Witcher since 2 years.
You've told me before that The Witcher is something that's really important for you in your life. Could you tell me a little bit more about how you got into it?
Yeah, definitely. I've always been very open to medieval and fantasy things. I was a child when my cousin visited me, and he always liked to play fantasy things. Whenever I got to play with him, we played that we were being hunted by orcs or just those fantasy things that children do when they play. And I really loved, well, I still love my cousin, but when I was a small child, he was more like a super idol for me. And I really admired him. And he was always into fantasy things, and he was always playing in the woods. I loved playing with him, and so I started loving fantasy. What I always enjoyed was when we were fighting with sticks, and now when I look back, I think he was just beating me with the stick because he was older and stronger, and he was quite mean when he was young. But I really enjoyed it when I was a kid, and so I started liking medieval things and fantasy things. Yeah, I enjoyed following pages like yours on social media. And then I saw your post, and I thought, well, I would love to talk about The Witcher. The same cousin recommended me the games when I got PS4, said, if you like medieval and fantasy things, you have to play The Witcher. It's the best game ever. And then I started playing it, but it was too exciting for me. I was never used to play and all the adrenaline and all of that. I enjoy watching, but playing was very hard for me. So I started it, and then I stopped playing it. But then I went with my parents to Italy, to Lucca, where this event of The Witcher show will soon take place. Then I lay in the sun and I got bored and I googled audiobook fantasy, and it was just a coincidence that The Witcher came up, and then I listened to The Witcher. It had me after the first seconds. It was so immersive, it was so well written that I just couldn't stop. And then I went back to Germany, started playing again. I felt brave enough now. And then so I've played the games and read the books and listened to the books.
That's so nice that you had that audiobook experience in Lucca. So at the time of recording, Lars and I are actually going to Lucca for the Lucca Comics and Games Convention in about a week. We're recording in October, and then I think by the time this episode releases, it actually might be maybe January 2020.
Oh.
So we're going to be like way into the Netflix show by that time. But at the time of recording, we're still about 2 months out from getting the Netflix show, from what rumors say.
So you'll know more at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
I'm sure it's going to be funny for people listening to this, knowing that I'm not even in Lucca yet, and knowing what all the listeners know by the time this episode comes out.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like some crazy little time warp thing. So you've told me before that you're actually very involved in like medieval events and LARPing communities. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I am. I started going to medieval or fantasy festivals when I was 13. There's one big one, it's called MPS, Medieval Fantasy Spectaculum. It's touring through Germany. And I really recommend you or your community or whoever Google where this festival is. So if you're in the area at that point, you should really come. There are bands, international bands, who are like, if you're into the music of medieval and fantasy things, it's pretty cool. Everyone is dressed in medieval clothes, and there's great food. Really, the food is great.
Oh, that sounds incredible.
Yeah, it is. After that, I started to do LARPing, which sounds freaky, but to be honest, it's the best thing I've ever experienced. So actually, it's like when you're playing the games, but you are Geralt. That's what LARPing is like.
Perfect.
There's a difference between the LARPing community in the USA and in Europe in general.
Okay.
So in Europe, it's very serious. Like, and the standards of the costumes are very high. So yeah, I'm doing Witcher LARP especially. LARP is the shortening for live action roleplay. You dress up like your character. It's like playing theater, but you have to act spontaneously. There's no text or script. You change the story with your behavior. I'm playing a Redanian squire.
Cool. So, a Redanian squire. Could you tell us a little bit more about that LARPing community that exists in Germany, some of your experience with it?
Yeah, so I live near to Hamburg, and Hanover is like 2 hours away from me. They started building a Witcher village inspired by the games. At one point in the games, there's a dialogue where Geralt says something like, "Oh, this is a very nice part of the village," or something like that. And they took the look of the houses and actually built them. It's so immersive, it looks so realistic, it's great. And you can sleep in the houses, everything looks like it does in the games. And this is where the best of those LARPing conventions take place. Yeah, and there are people playing Scoia'taels, there are Nilfgaardians, there are people from Toussaint. It's great.
How long do these usually go on for? Like a couple days or just an afternoon?
It's more like a couple of days. So I think the Witcher cons are 4 days.
Oh, wow.
And you camp in tents or you can sleep in the houses. It's up to you. You can also like message the people who are running those events and ask, hey, maybe can I come around for maybe 1 day without sleeping there? And the people are very nice. You can always talk to them and there's always a solution.
Wow. But it's always incredibly immersive, right?
Yeah.
Like for 4 days, you're very much immersed in the world and in your character, right?
Yeah, and there's also actual fighting, which is quite interesting. So there are weapons, but they look real. They look so realistic, but they are made so you cannot harm yourself with them.
Right.
There are 2 kind of techniques how to fight. So the first one is theatrical fighting. So even if you lose the fight, if you look cooler, you're actually the winner. Because that generates a lot of cool scenes for people who are watching. Also a second way of fighting, which is if you get hit in an area which might cause a huge damage to you, you're hurt and you can't keep on fighting, and then you have to act out you have been hit and all of that. So it's quite cool.
Wow.
If you're only English speaking, that's not a problem. There are also many international LARPs going on in Germany. You should really Google it, and if you're interested, you should come.
Yeah.
It's so hard to describe what it is, because actually you have to experience it. So I really recommend everyone to come. It's just great. Even if you're not a great role player or anything. Still, it's just the atmosphere, you know?
I actually did hear about Witcher School in Poland, the ones that like I think happen a couple times a year in like Polish castles. But I think there you're actually LARPing as like an apprentice Witcher or trainee Witcher.
Yeah.
I did see that they had international versions of those as well. And I think again, I was like, ooh, what if I go, or what if I talk Lars into going to, or like anyone else in community, and like actually being able to meet in this kind of context, or even to cover it as, I mean, quote unquote press for the podcast. But I think it'd be absolutely incredible to go there, talk to people who, like you, LARPing is a huge part of their lives and of their identity and their hobbies, the things that they like to do. So I'd love to hear more about it. What were some of the things that surprised you the most when you started LARPing and about this community?
That's a good question. What surprised me most, I don't know if it's just with me, if it happens to everyone, but when I'm doing LARP, I totally forget my normal life. It sounds a bit weird, but for example, in this village, it feels like you're in a dream and you forget everything else. It's so immersive that you can't think of your normal life anymore. It feels so far away suddenly.
Wow.
And it helps me really to calm down whenever something in my life is just a bit too much, you know. It surprised me that is possible, to like forget your normal life and how kind the people are.
Yeah.
And when I started LARPing, I was a bit afraid to like get to know new people. Because at first, LARPing seems to be strange, you know? And whenever I try to talk people into coming with me, they always say like, no, I wouldn't take myself seriously. I would laugh all the time. But that has never happened because it's so immersive. Everyone takes themselves serious, and so do you. You feel like you're in another world. It's like actually being part of the Witcher books. And that's just what every reader wants, right? Or at least what I want.
For sure.
Well, not in every chapter, but...
There's a few there that we could probably skip, for sure. So what is it like for you to get into character as this Redanian squire?
It's really challenging to get into a Redanian character, because, as you know, the Redanians are really racist and not nice people. And it's, for example, in my group, there's one person playing a witch hunter. Sometimes it's very hard for me, like, I know in my character I have to see him like a hero. To me, he's a hero who protects me from evil mages and all of that. It's really hard to like keep this mindset and get into this mindset, because actually this is a horrible man burning innocent women. That's very challenging. But it's also fun to like really try to change your perspective. But of course, that's all in-game. No one is really racist and we're all friends. It's just a role. So what I do is sometimes I create fake memories to get into character. Like I think, okay, what did my home look like? What did my mom look like? What did my parents tell me? Like, what are my memories and all of that? That's something that helps me to get into character.
Yeah, that's a really interesting theater tactic to use. And it's so cool to hear about things like that. Is there anything else that helps you?
Because everything looks so real. Whenever I dress into my costume and go to the places or go to the locations we're doing that, if the location is very good, I'm already partly into character. It probably sounds very hard, but it's not that hard if you take yourself serious and are able to be open to all of that. I think that's the most important thing, just to have a good time.
That's so interesting. It's nice to hear that you can become immersed in like different worlds or in different characters and experience things that you don't ever experience in everyday life.
Yeah. For example, whenever you want to experience something very emotionally engaging and serious, you can play a serious character. Like the Witcher universe is quite good for that, like a Redanian character and all of that. But if you just want to have a fun time and with fun people, you can just muck in character. Like, it's really cool.
What happens, let's say, after these few sessions, like after a few days, you've been in character for a bit? What is that return journey like, immersing yourself back into everyday living?
That's weird. After a LARP, you have all these great scenes in your mind that you saw, all those great things that you've experienced, and it follows you through your everyday life. So for me, it's like I'm always daydreaming after that. And I'm feeling a bit like I had to leave a place where I did not want to leave, kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Everything seems so boring after you've escaped a troop of orcs, hid in a barrel. And so if you've experienced all those adventure things, everything seems so boring in your real life. That's not so cool.
So if you were to, let's say, pitch LARPing to someone, and we did touch upon this very briefly, what would you say?
I would say do it. So I would recommend LARPing to everyone who enjoys adventures and enjoys having fun with people. I always experience that people are afraid to go, that they would like to go, because actually that's what you want to do, right? You want to experience cool adventures and have a good time with friends, but everyone is always afraid to do that. LARPing is so great. Don't be afraid. Just try it out. When you have a question about LARPing or anything, whenever you have a question, you can message me on Instagram. Maybe you can tag me in one of your posts, and then I would be glad to help people find a cool LARP or something like that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, because I'm sure, as you said, like a lot of people are interested in it, but a little scared to, like take that first step and to go.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to hear from somebody who's been involved in this community and who really loves it. So thank you for that. Today, Louisa and I will be discussing A Little Sacrifice, the fourth short story in Andrzej Sapkowski's Sword of Destiny. Part 1 starts, Geralt is commissioned by Duke Aglovall to translate a conversation between him and his mermaid lover, Shinaz.
I really enjoyed this short story because it totally changed my view on sirens. My relationship to sirens was not so good because I've told you before that I was very afraid to play, right? That it was too exciting for me. I couldn't cope with the adrenaline. I wanted to go on a boat to Skellige, but whenever I came close to a boat, like 20 sirens tried to kill me, or at least I think it was sirens. And so when I started reading the books, and at one point it says, the siren said this and that, I was like, a siren! Oh, a siren! What's going on, a siren? But the siren was quite lovely, so...
That's really interesting that they say siren in German, because you've read the books in German, right?
Yeah.
In the English translation, it just comes out and says that she's a mermaid.
Really?
Which has different connotations, like sirens versus mermaids, even in English. So that's really interesting to hear that it's different in German and that they chose to say mermaid in English.
That's funny, because I wanted to ask you about the difference between mermaids and sirens. In Germany, it's like sirens are quite similar to mermaids, but they sit on rocks and sing and lead sailors into their death.
Yes. Yeah, that's still the same.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, the translation says sirens. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, because for me, and I think for at least most people, at least in the US, when you think of mermaids, you think of The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
Either Disney or Hans Christian Andersen. And that's relatively pleasant. That's really interesting to hear right out of the gate that that's different.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah.
I mean, as we do talk about mermaids, there are quite a lot of parallels with The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen, as I said, but you just have Geralt basically in the middle of that story.
Yeah.
As it is with like a lot of the short stories, Sapkowski just kind of bastardizes all of these like famous fairy tales and then just like sticks Geralt in there.
I love how he does it. It's so amazing. You know all the stories, but still you can't really tell what the ending will be.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, I know the story. It's still so exciting. I really love how he mixes those fairy tale elements with his story. It's great.
Geralt comes to this town near the sea, and when we open up, he's talking to a mermaid, and the first 2 lines of the story are just about how amazing her breasts are. Geralt is singing to her in a language that's supposed to be very similar to Elder Speech, which is spoken by elves. It's more melodious, so it's almost like they're singing the language of the elves. So Geralt's able to communicate with her. In the audiobooks, Peter Kenny actually sings Geralt's lines, which is really funny, and he sings them awfully, which is even funnier. So it's like super awkward to listen to. I would highly recommend getting the audiobooks. It's just like, he sings it so gravelly. The mermaid will just be like, don't translate, don't try yourself, da-da-da-da-da. And then when Peter Kenny sings for Geralt, it's like, Shinaz, understand, he cannot have a tail. It's so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really funny. And when I first heard the audiobooks, I think I straight up laughed. Because I wasn't expecting it. It embellishes the story in such a unique way.
Yeah. So at first I started reading the chapter. Then I listened to them in English with the audiobooks again. And after that, I read it again. And I couldn't read it in a normal voice anymore. It was like Peter Kenny's voice was always in my head. And I couldn't read it quick. I had to read it in a singy voice. But it's so hilarious. And the thing you said with her boobs, that's so unlogical. Geralt must be so used to beautiful breasts. We all know how Jens and Tit's bodies are, right? They're they're gorgeous. I know he's a monster slayer, but I don't think that a tail is a super normal thing for him. He sees in his everyday life. So why the hell would he not look at her tail, but at her boobs? Why would he not look at her tail? Why at the boobs? That's just a male author writing female characters.
Man, it's kind of funny. I'm surprised that Geralt does get as distracted by it as he does. But apparently they're absolutely incredible tits.
Yeah.
As we'll hear repeatedly throughout the chapter.
Yeah.
So there's some really interesting things about the context that were dropped into his readers. It kind of goes all the way back to episode 2. Back in episode 2, A Grain of Truth, we talked about Nivellen and his vampiric lover, Verena, and they couldn't really communicate. So apparently, whenever Verena, the vampire, would talk, Nivellen would be like, she says some weird things. I don't really know what it is, but we love each other. That's basically what's going on with this Duke, Aglaval, and this mermaid, Shinaz. The Duke doesn't understand, or we presume he doesn't understand Elder speech. That's why Geralt is there. He's specifically there to translate. And we get some really, really wonderful lines in Geralt's translations, which are both very interesting and very funny, I think, at the same time. Supposedly they've been in a relationship for a while. They love each other. They want to marry each other. The Duke wants the mermaid to get legs. And then the mermaid is like, I want to have his fry, but he has those stupid legs. I want him to be a merman and have a tail. Neither of them wants to give in. That is why Geralt is here. Geralt's trying to convince her to get legs of some sort, and the mermaid says that she knows a sea witch that could give the Duke a fin. Again, going back to the idea of Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen, we get a very brief introduction to the title of the chapter, A Little Sacrifice. She says, whoever loves makes sacrifices. I made sacrifices for him. Every day I hauled myself out onto the rocks for him. I wore out the scales on my bottom, frayed my fins, I caught colds for him, and he will not sacrifice those 2 hideous pegs for me. Love doesn't mean talking. One also has to be able to give up things, to make sacrifices. Tell him that. In Sapkowski's writing, he always brings back the theme of the chapter or the theme of the book. And again, we'll see this in A Little Sacrifice as well. This idea kind of manifests in a bunch of different ways.
What she says, it's actually hilarious. Like, I love how he combines humor with the deep message. The beginning of the sentence is quite funny and the rest is so deep. I love how he does that. You said that they are not able to communicate, right? Mm-hmm. So do you know the situation whenever you get to know a guy or something and you don't really talk, but you can feel like there's this flirting high tension in the room?
Yes, I'm familiar.
And then suddenly he starts talking and you're like, I wish you wouldn't have done that because now I can hear that you're an idiot.
Are you listening on my life?
So, yeah. Just imagine they're like married for some years, but they're like super unhappy now, so he hates everything that she cooks, tastes like fish, and she can't stand how he doesn't want her to communicate with the children in a singy-sangy voice. And they wish back the old good times where they just threw glances at each other.
Yeah.
No, I'm only kidding.
I do have a lot of questions about that exact thing that you're talking about, and we'll probably get to it by the end of the chapter, but I have a lot of lingering questions about the mechanics of this relationship.
Yeah, me too. But let's wait with that.
Okay. So the end of this section is, again, like a very funny example of Geralt translating, and you'll kind of get an understanding of, I think, of Geralt as a person throughout this, and also of his job. This excerpt reads, Geralt translated quickly, trying not to be vulgar. He was not very successful. The Duke flushed and swore foully. The brazen hussy, he yelled. The frigid mackerel. Let her find herself a cod. What did he say? Shinaz asked curiously, swimming over. That he doesn't want a tail. And the mermaid replies, then tell him to dry up. And the Duke asks, what did she say? She told you, the Witcher translated, to go drown yourself. So it's just one of those things that's like a little funny.
Yeah, it's just hilarious. I love the dialogues. The dialogues in The Witcher are always so funny and so great. Oh, I love them.
In part 2, after Geralt's failed attempt at reconciliation between the Duke and Mermaid, Geralt and Dandelion find themselves penniless in Bremervoord and without food. Larry Druhard, a local spice merchant, appears asking if Dandelion can perform at his son's wedding. As it turns out, Dandelion is the second bard to perform, the first being Essie Davin.
I have a question. About that.
Yeah, what's up?
Why is Geralt always broke? Just think of all the opportunities he has to get rich within 2 seconds due to his skills and that he's a great monster slayer. But he's like no businessman at all. How can he, he could be so rich with his skills. Why is he always broke?
I mean, I guess when you think about it, Geralt is quite a lot like a blue-collar exterminator. But I also think that Dandelion spends their money when they're together. I think that's probably what happens. I think they do mention that they sold like a couple of things. I think it was in this chapter that they did.
So probably the explanation why Geralt is always broke is called Dandelion. Everyone has this friend, right? The Dandelion friend.
Oh dear, yeah. And you wouldn't be wrong in saying that, I'm sure. But after Geralt's morning with the Duke, Geralt still doesn't have any money, and someone says he pays for results, not good intentions. I think, and then he specifically told Geralt that he was meant to bring the mermaid, and it didn't happen, so Geralt didn't get paid, despite the time and the effort that he gave that morning in order to try to get the mermaid.
That explains a lot.
So this part in of itself is quite short, but we do get like a very interesting little tidbit about the context of the worlds again. There's a whole sidebar about Dandelion angered a bunch of people with like some lewd on-the-spot improvised ballad. Guardians of the Forest is the name for them, and they're rangers. They're defined here as a volunteer force whose mission is to eradicate non-humans. They had to abandon their original plan because Dandelion insulted them and they were about to get chased out, I think, or killed. That's how they ended up in this town by the sea. It's almost as like you were saying, like LARPing with someone who's a witch hunter. It provides like a lot of more context about the worlds in that their mission is specifically racist. It's to eradicate non-humans, and that's the whole point of them. Even though it's a very short part of the chapter, it's a very obnoxiously long paragraph in which they talk about this. It says a lot, I think, about the context of the world.
Yeah, definitely. It's a detail that helps you understand the world much better, and also the dark aspects of the Witcher universe.
And I think it throws into nice contrast the fact that we did open with a love story between a human and a non-human.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's also this.
Yeah, you're right.
I just realized that as I'm talking about it. I didn't think about that earlier.
That was deep. Yeah, you're right. I really like that as well.
At the very end, there's this kind of like bumbling merchant who wanders over and he's like, Master, Master. And Geralt turns around and he's like, yes. And then he's like, oh no, Master Dandelion. And Dandelion just transforms into like this fully functioning peacock. And he's just like, what? The airs come on and he's just like, he was asking for me. This merchant comes over and he's like, my son's getting married. Would you please perform? It comes out that there's another bard there and Dandelion again starts putting on airs. He's like, I'm not going to sacrifice my art just to be the second bard to perform. And it's like a whole big thing.
So Dandelion's actually quite famous in the universe, right?
Yeah. Geralt and Dandelion, their fame kind of precedes them.
Yeah, that's right. And you can tell by the reaction of the merchant that he's very nervous when he talks to Dandelion, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be nervous too if like my son was getting married that evening and my wife was on my case, I'm sure.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so it turns out there's one other bard there who's set to perform, and at the very end of this chapter, we just hear that her name is Essie Daven. We're going to hand it over to Lars from Witcherflix for recent news on the upcoming Netflix show. And when we come back, Louisa and I will continue our discussion of A Little Sacrifice.
Hey, it's Lars from Witcherflix, and this is Tidings from Toussaint. First, a happy new year to everyone. I hope the new year is already treating you well. The Witcher on Netflix is out for almost a month now, and oh boy, it created quite a stir. Luckily, we already know quite a lot about Season 2, so let's jump right into it. But at first, let's start with some awesome numbers for Season 1 of The Witcher show. It was the most popular series release on Netflix in 2019 in countries such as the United Kingdom, Germany, Austria, Poland, Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, Denmark or Finland. According to the Steam charts, the video game The Witcher 3: The Wild Hunt set a new record of 103,329 concurrent players. This is the all-time high since its release more than 4 years ago. And of course, it's more than likely that The Witcher on Netflix is responsible for this new record. When it comes to Season 1, the man himself, author Andrzej Sapkowski, also talked about his impressions. He specifically mentioned Henry Cavill's interpretation of Geralt of Rivia. He said, I was more than happy with Henry Cavill's appearance as the Witcher. He's a real professional. Just as Viggo Mortensen gave his face to Aragorn in The Lord of the Rings, so Henry gave his to Geralt. and it shall be forever so. This is so wholesome, and I couldn't agree more. On the Netflix Witcher subreddit, showrunner Lauren Hissrich revealed her original pitch to Netflix. She also addressed the most talked about things in Season 1, the season's structure and the different timelines. She wrote, I want to track 3 separate stories for the first season, Geralt, Yennefer and Ciri. In the simplest of terms, I want to tell the origin story of each character. In order to make that work, we'll be working in at least 2 different frameworks of time, and sometimes even 3. The non-linear storytelling in the short stories and saga are one of the franchise's most appealing elements to me, and I think TV audiences are savvy enough to follow along. The idea is that the 3 stories will run parallel to each other, each covering different ground and different periods of time. Over the season, the stories will start to weave together. Geralt's story and Yennefer's story will connect first, midway through the season, and Ciri's story will weave into theirs in either the penultimate or final episode of the season. But what's in store for The Witcher in the future? The production for Season 2 has already begun, the scripts are already written, and showrunner Lauren Hissrich has arrived in London to continue her work on The Witcher. In an interview with Collider, Lauren said, We're not shooting yet, but we have a pretty good idea of where we're going with all of the stories. Moreover, she added that they will start filming sometime in the spring. At the same time, the spies at Redanian Intelligence are already reporting that The Witcher show will adapt even more short stories in Season 2. Redanian Intelligence has learned that A Grain of Truth will be adapted very early in Season 2. It's the short story about Nivellen, a man cursed to look like a beast. Redanian Intelligence further reports that the adaptation will differ from the source material. In the books, only Geralt meets Nivellen. On the show, Geralt and Ciri will stop at Nivellen's mansion on their way to Kaer Morhen. Moreover, Royce Pearson, the actor of Istrid, confirmed on Twitter that he will be back for Season 2. This could mean that the short story A Shard of Ice will also be adapted in some shape or form. This is a short story where Geralt and Istrid meet. When it comes to the plot of Season 2, Lauren Hissrich has already hinted at some things in various interviews. In an interview for Redanian Intelligence, she said, As expected from the saga, Ciri really takes center stage in Season 2. The whole world is after her, and she has to find safety and respite with Geralt, and eventually Yennefer. Problem is, they're complete strangers. She doesn't know Geralt, doesn't see why she should automatically trust him, and really doesn't laugh when he starts making big decisions in her life, especially when she's still mourning the loss of her grandmother in Sintra. For his part, Geralt dutifully wants to protect Ciri, but also doesn't know anything about being a dad, and certainly doesn't know how to balance that with the need to continue doing his job. There's some comedy in how these two come together and eventually bond, but that belies a deeper reflection on what it means to become a family. In an interview with Steve Varley on YouTube, Lauren also talked about her long game plans for the show. She said, What I mean is that we have the books. I don't feel the need to go beyond the existing books. They are great source material. Andrzej Sapkowski has written all of them, there's a natural ending to them, and I feel like as long as we stick that landing, which is the ending of the books, then we'll be good. Unfortunately, we still have to wait at least another year for Season 2, as its release is planned for 2021, most likely sometime in spring. But to help us through this long off-season, Netflix maybe has some exciting stuff for us. In an interview with Telewicza Polsce, executive producer Tomek Baginski said, We're planning a few more interesting surprises between seasons, but I will not say exactly what will happen. Could he hint at an animated Witcher series featuring some minor characters? Back in November, a rumor about this was floating around, and after Tomek's interview, there's even more hope that there will be some new Witcher-related shows in the not-so-distant future. Anyway guys, that's it for me for today. We'll talk again in the next episode of Breakfast in Beauclair. Until then, thanks again for listening and good luck on the path.
Hey everyone, welcome back from the break. I'm here with Louisa discussing A Little Sacrifice from Andrzej Sapkowski's Sword of Destiny. In part 3, Geralt and Dandelion attend the wedding where Geralt meets Essie Daven, Dandelion's young troubadour friend. The Witcher and young poet are innately drawn toward each other. The Duke arrives at the wedding for a private word with the Witcher about a mysterious attack on a pearl diving ship at a location off the coast called the Dragon's Fangs.
Did you already mention that she's called Little Eye?
Not yet. Do you want to talk about it now?
Yeah, as I just said, her nickname is Little Eye, and I was wondering, is she called Little Eye because of her beautiful eyes, or is there another reason I did not get?
I think that's it. Essie Daven, she's got like this gorgeous, hair. She's very like petite and little, but she has like these huge, huge blue eyes that are absolutely stunning. But I guess she has like bangs or something that cover one side of her face. So it notes that she has like one really spectacular eye, and then she blows her hair away in kind of like a puff. The narrator, Geralt, notes that like her second eye was equally as beautiful and comparable to the first.
Yeah, right. When she was first mentioned, I thought that she was maybe Dandelion's girl at first, but nope.
She's a gorgeous character,
yes,
Little Eye.
She's so lovely from the beginning.
Yeah.
I love the first dialogue she has with Dandelion. Can you read it?
I can. It's pretty long, but it's... yeah, the dialogue between Dandelion and Essie is very interesting when they first meet, and it's seemingly very tense. Dandelion says, "Greetings, Little Eye. That was a pretty ballad you just sang. You've improved your repertoire considerably. I've always maintained that if one is incapable of writing poetry oneself, one should borrow other people's. Have you borrowed many of them?" So apparently she was singing one of Dandelion's ballads in the beginning. "A few," Essie Daven retorted at once and smiled, revealing little white teeth. "2 or 3. I wanted to use more, but it wasn't possible. Dreadful gibberish, and the tunes, though pleasant and unpretentious in their simplicity, not to say primitivism, are not what my audiences expect. Have you written anything new, Dandelion? I don't seem to be aware of it." Small wonder, the bard sighed. "I sing my ballads in places in which only the gifted and renowned are invited, and you don't frequent such locations after all." Essie blushed slightly and blew the lock of her hair aside. "Very true," she said. "I don't frequent bordellos, as the atmosphere depresses me. I sympathize with you, that you have to sing in places like that, but well, that's the way it is. If one has no talent, one can't choose one's audiences." And then it says, "Now Dandelion visibly blushed." Apparently Little Eye laughs and then gives him a really big hug. And then she just said, like, "I'm glad to see you again." So that kind of like fun banter, I love. So it's really funny to hear it written out here.
Yeah, definitely. At that point, I kind of realized, okay, I think she's not his lover or anything. It was too banterish, but not in a sexual way, but more like a deep, trusting friendship way.
Yeah, and then Dandelion at the end of it, once they kind of, for lack of a better term, like break character, Dandelion says, "You are magnificent by the gods. I haven't heard such marvelous spitefulness for ages. You bicker even more captivatingly than you sing, and you look simply stunning." So, as you said, like, it does seem like a relationship that's built very much on trust, and we're going to hear a little bit more about the relationship between Dandelion and Little Eye, like, throughout the chapter.
As I said before, I love their relationship. I think I read that dialogue like 5 times and loved to tears. I really love how funny and biting they are.
Aglaval arrives at the wedding for a private word with Geralt, and he's brought along this guy Zellist, who's the bailiff and the pearl diving steward, which is a super specific occupation, I guess. They tell Geralt that apparently a pearl diving ship went out, some super mysterious happening that everyone was gone from the ship. There was blood on deck, so it looked like a fight had happened, but no one was there. No bodies, no nothing. So apparently now all the divers and the fishermen in the area are too scared to go out to sea. This is how the economy of this town runs, is off of the sea. Aglaval needs them to like go do their job so that things could prosper and thrive.
That's quite mysterious, the way they got killed.
And we have no idea at this point in the story what that was or what it could have been.
I was so sure that it was the siren because I was still very, very not trusting her because of my experience in the games, but...
Again, we get this one little line from Aglaval, which makes it really clear how little he seems to value Geralt or how entitled he believes he is to Geralt's services, where they try to talk Geralt into going, and Aglaval says, "A hungry witcher is a good witcher."
That's so disrespectful. Wow.
Yeah, and that Geralt would do anything just because he has no other choice. So Geralt and Zellist, the bailiff, and the pearl diving steward, they agreed to meet in the morning at the harbor so Zellist can actually show Geralt where this is happening.
Wow, I was not sure if Geralt would maybe hurt him or anything. That's so horrible from him to say such a thing. He's not valuing him at all, and he does not care about him at all. Wow, he's such a dig. Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's funny that he comes again to Geralt to ask him to do something where he was so unhappy with his work in the first place. Actually, maybe he likes Geralt or at least admires him in a way. I'm always trying to explain to me why people are like this.
I wonder if it's almost like he had no other choice for anyone in the area who's even close to dealing with some sort of like sea mystery. So I wonder if Geralt was just like, he already had Geralt from, that morning. So he just goes and finds Geralt again. I think effectively, like, you didn't do your job, so I have another job for you, which doesn't really make much sense when you think about it. You're right. Like, he didn't get anything out of Geralt's original outcome, so why is he coming to him for a second job? But maybe it is because he feels he can exploit Geralt.
Like, he knows that Geralt relies on him, right? Because he's still, as he says, hungry. He has still no money, and so he kind of is dependent, like, on Aglavol, and maybe he likes that. That he knows that he has the control or anything. I don't know. I still have many questions about this character Aglavol. I think we can discuss that in the following chapters.
While Dandelion is kind of busying himself with performing and then also with the girls that are at this wedding, Geralt and Essie take a moment to go out onto the terrace somewhere private outdoors. They start talking, and it's this very interesting kind of section where Geralt is very enthralled by her, and it seems that she's a little hard to read for him. There's this excerpt that I actually put on Gudmoren a little bit ago. Essie says, "What do you connect with the sea, Geralt?" "Unease," he answered, almost without thinking. "Interesting, and you seem so calm and composed." "I didn't say I feel unease. You asked for associations. Associations are the image of the soul. I know what I'm talking about. I'm a poet." "And what do you associate with the sea, Essie?" he asked quickly, to put an end to discussions about the unease he was feeling. "With constant movement," she answered after a pause, "with change, and with riddles, with mystery, with something I cannot grasp, which I might be able to describe in 1,000 different ways, in 1,000 different poems, never actually reaching the core, the heart of the matter. Yes, that's it." "And so," he said, feeling the verbena affecting him more and more strongly, "what you feel is also unease, and you seem so calm and composed." She turned toward him, tossing back her golden curl and fixing her gorgeous eyes on him. "I'm not calm or composed, Geralt." And Geralt suddenly kisses her.
Oh, wow.
And Essie kisses him back before pulling away, and the moment's super, super tense, and then they just go back inside.
That scene shocked me. Like,
Yeah.
I think it was well written. I think I had goose pimples. Actually, Geralt was used to women reading his mind, right?
Yes.
I think maybe Essie can also do that, but without magical skills or anything.
Maybe she's a Pisces.
Yeah, maybe she is. Maybe it reminds him of a certain sorceress or anything. And she's doing that very provocative, right? So she's not making a secret out of that she can kind of look into his emotions or anything. Well, I felt that the kiss was very intense and very romantic. And then suddenly I came to realize that there's a huge age difference between them.
Yeah.
So I Googled, like, Essie is 18, right?
Uh-huh.
And I Googled, and I looked it up in different sources. Some say that Geralt is like 80, but some say that he's over 100 by now, or at that point. And that made me like, ooh. What's going on there?
So I was also kind of skimming, because you pointed that out in the show notes that you added. I was Googling too, and supposedly he might be anywhere from maybe like 50 to 80 or like even a little older than that. But supposedly he looks about 30. You and you're about 18 and I'm almost 30. So I can't imagine. I mean, even his outward appearance aside, like, yeah, he himself is 60 or like however old he is, getting very overwhelmed by this 18-year-old woman.
Yeah. It makes it a little weird.
Yeah.
but only if you think about it, so just don't think about it. I'm sorry that I pointed that out. It destroyed all the magic in that scene.
Oh, no.
Let's ignore this fact.
I mean, no, it's interesting because Geralt has already kind of like loved and lost Yennefer at this point, and we do know that throughout this beginning of the story, and as well as all the other short stories that have preceded this one. But Geralt has already loved and lost her, however many times. At least once. And I think Yennefer is meant to be older than Geralt as well, and Essie is considerably younger. So it's interesting to see, I think, the contrast between these two women as this chapter goes on, and this is something that we'll see Geralt kind of grapple with internally throughout the entirety of the chapter.
Definitely, you can't compare Essie and Yennefer. They're just so... Like, Essie could be Geralt's and Yennefer's daughter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, from the age... Oh, wow. Yeah, but yeah, they're two so different characters. Geralt has to, and we will see how he copes with that.
Yeah. And it's not great.
Oh, and at one point, it says that Essie smells of verbena, right? When can we expect to get the perfume of the Essie perfume?
I was about to be like, Charlotte, help.
Yeah, could you please text Charlotte and she can tell us when the Essie perfume will be released?
Yeah, I'd imagine it'll probably take a while. I do know that she wanted to do all of the ones that are mentioned in the books, and Essie Davin is in her road plan.
I hope so.
I mean, again, I guess going all the way back to episode 2, so not just for Nivellen and Verena's relationship, but also for our lovely conversation with Charlotte of Vengerberg Glamrai. She has said that, like, some of these perfumes take her, like, a couple months to, like, even more than a year to actually develop. I mean, I can't wait for more of these, and they're so beautiful, but no, I'm as curious as you are. I'm just like, ooh, verbena.
Oh, fun fact, I have the Yennefer perfume, and I brought it to a LARP, to a Game of Thrones LARP.
Oh, really?
Someone was poisoned. And before that happened, it was like a ladies' tea time party.
Interesting.
And so all the ladies were in a hall, and we were all sitting and drinking tea before this person was poisoned. And before that, I gave the ladies this perfume, and they were all smelling on it, and they said that they thought it was very, very good, that it had very good smell. But after this murderer, after she was killed, everyone thought that it has something to do with this perfume, because the smell was so intense. Someone who was playing a maester came to me and was like, can you give me this thing you gave all the women? What was inside? It smells so intense. So yeah, that was fun.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. I'll still like tag her on this episode. Oh man. So full circle on these perfumes, and how Sapkowski uses scent as like a identifier for all of the women throughout the books, and especially the sorceresses and all of Geralt's lovers.
Definitely, yeah. But to be honest, it helped me, for me, how he described the smell of her. It made it even more intense.
In part 4, Dandelion returns to the attic room at Druhard's, where he and Geralt are staying, and confronts Geralt about his actions at the wedding with Essie. So this is like the best friend talk of the chapter, and we'll get a couple of these, but the whole brunt of it, the thesis of Dandelion's monologue at Geralt is like, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
I really like this chapter because it gave me a closer look to their friendship.
Yeah.
Because actually all the time I was wondering, like, why are they even friends? So would you like to be friends with the person who like manipulates people all the time, especially women, tells everyone your secrets, is arrogant, and uses you as a bodyguard, always brings you into trouble, insults you, behaves like a child, and lies to you? So I was like, why are they friends? Why are they friends? And after this dialogue, I realized that Geralt might have a little self-destructive tendency, or that sometimes he has a self-destructive behavior. And I think Dandelion protects him from that and knows him very well and tells him the truth and helps him, and by that helps him to deal with his feelings. And I think that's the explanation why they're friends.
It's like this very lovely attraction of opposites in their friendship, where they're just so different that their opposing points of view a lot of the time bring out the best in each other.
Yeah.
I think as best they can.
Definitely, yeah. Really, this dialogue is so good. As you said before, that he's all the time like just telling him, you're an idiot. I know you think you know everything, but that's not the case. Listen to me. I'll tell you what it is. I really like that.
So a bit of the dialogue here, and again, it is a lot of Dandelion monologuing and berating Geralt, but it says, do you know what your problem is, Geralt? You think you're different. You flaunt your otherness, what you consider abnormal. You aggressively impose that abnormality on others, not understanding that for people who think clear-headedly, you're the most normal man under the sun, and they all wish that everybody was so normal. You wrongly thought, Geralt, that little I was interested in you out of morbid, downright perverted curiosity, that she looks at you as though you were a queer fish, a two-headed calf, or a salamander in a menagerie, and you immediately became annoyed, gave her a rude, undeserved reprimand at the first opportunity, struck back a blow that she hadn't even dealt. I witnessed it, after all. I didn't witness the further course of events, of course, but I noticed your flight from the room and saw her glowing cheeks when you returned. Yes, Geralt, I'm alerting you to a mistake, and you have already made it. You wanted to take revenge on her for, in your opinion, her morbid curiosity. You decided to exploit that curiosity. You tried to learn if it was possible to bed her in the hay, if she was curious to find out what it's like to make love with a misfit, with a witcher. Fortunately, Essie turned out to be smarter than you and generously took pity on your stupidity, having understood its cause. I conclude this from the fact you did not return from the jetty with a fat lip.
I love how he analyzes and destroys everything Geralt could say against that.
I know. And Geralt, by the end of it, though, is super annoyed. Especially because Dandelion just gets more and more, I think, to the core of what he's either self-conscious about or upset about, because Dandelion says, I know who warped you like that, who left you unable to understand a normal woman. Oh, but that Yennefer of yours was a troublemaker. I'm damned if I know what you see in her. Do you really not prefer normal girls like Essie? What do sorceresses have that Essie doesn't? Age, perhaps? Little Eye may not be the youngest, but she's as old as she looks. I think Dandelion, as you said, just gets right to Geralt, and he just knows Geralt so well and just can read into him.
Yeah. Do you know this feeling when you're just very annoyed by someone because they are right and you know that, but you can't admit it? I think that's this feeling. Yeah, this shows how good Dandelion knows Geralt. Yeah, he's also quite good at reading his mind somehow.
And I think you also have an interesting dichotomy in how they handle themselves or handle conflict. Dandelion just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and that's basically all this part is. Geralt, as Dandelion is doing this, he kind of tries to curb him, and then eventually Geralt just shuts down.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see, like, throughout the short stories, too. You know, Geralt, he's not always, like, the brightest bulb in the box. And there's definitely times where he kind of lacks common sense. But a lot of time, he's very perceptive. But he kind of handles a lot of things on his own, especially with, like, his conflict of emotion or morality. So for someone else to kind of expose this struggle that he's already having internally and to try to force him to make a choice before he's ready to, I think it says a lot about Geralt's character now that he's feeling Dandelion kind of brush up on something that he's really uncomfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. That's just the absolute core of their relationship. I love how Dandelion helps him to cope with the feelings and the kind of self-held hatred he sometimes has. I think this is one of my favorite parts, because even though it's almost only Dandelion who speaks, it reveals so much about Geralt. How he reacts to that just shows everyone like, yep, that's what he was coping with, yep. And I really like that.
It's a very specific kind of relationship, and I feel like it's the kind of thing that, you know, most people do well with friends that have slightly different viewpoints or that can help them see either the bigger picture or the smaller details depending on how they themselves think. I think Geralt is sometimes the kind of person, I mean, that obviously depends on the situation, but sometimes like this, he's kind of lost in the weeds right now, especially with something that's so personal to him that it seems like he feels like he has to bear this weight alone, the weight of what to do in these relationships or the regret that he feels with Yennefer. His magnetism toward Essie and Essie's magnetism toward him is informed by the difficulties that he's had in his relationship with Yennefer.
Yeah.
And it's hard, like even dating now, like obviously all of your past experiences inform your future ones and they shouldn't hold you back, but you should at least be conscious of them. And it does seem like at this point, Geralt's relationships with Yennefer are holding him back from just being comfortable with Essie at all.
It's a big part of Geralt that he always wants to like cope with his problems on his own. And I love how Dandelion forces himself on Geralt. Like Geralt has never asked him or anything. Never asked for his help or his opinion. Dandelion just gives him that. Forces him to like, listen to me. I know you don't want to hear this, but this is what's going on. And I think that's what Geralt needs. Like someone who does not wait to be asked or anything.
Yeah.
I think, they work together quite well.
Are you ready to move on to part 5?
Yes, I am. The critical part. No, just kidding.
Oh, man. Before we get to the rest of the chapter, we're going to cut it here for today. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode, and Louisa will return in the next to finish the second half of A Little Sacrifice. Thanks for joining us at the breakfast table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and a complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastandbeauclair.com. Breakfast in Beauclair is created by Alyssa from Good Morning. It's hosted by Alyssa with the Tidings of Toussaint news segment by Larson Witcherflix. The show is edited by Alyssa with the Breakfast in Beauclair theme by Mojo Filter Media and Tidings of Toussaint theme by Bettina Campomanes. Breakfast in Beauclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City with Louise of Covier, the owner of the Churlish Porpoise, Cool Guy Henry Eric Scotland, Katie, the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob Mahaka Melder Joe, Julie, Sylvia Skelgo, Wolpe, Brandon Jefferson, Eva of Gallet, and Eric the Bear of Beauclair. Special thanks to International Hansa for their support.